And welcome back to the next part of the Top 10 20 Strongest Captain Clash Shinigami series. And coming in, the bubble boy here is Shinji Hirako. So, Shinji, I rank as number 11, the 11th strongest captain. Now, before we continue, I do want to just touch on some things and reiterate something real quick. Because I was getting into a discussion with someone in the comments about why I ranked Soifon where I did. And look, I understand where they were coming from, and I agreed with points they made. But I feel like, because it's hard to really get your point across in writing without being able to emphasize through voice. So I'm going to just say here, where the placements come from is because I always got to reiterate this, I think, is that I put all the captains against each other on neutral terms. Like, Mayuri doesn't get to prepare for a fight with any of them, so he's got to use what he has. And, like, they don't necessarily have any... It's if these captains or characters were fighting each other without any real idea of what their abilities were. So it was basically, I did that, and I basically ranked it from how much they won versus how much they lost. And the winner, people who won more battles obviously ranked higher than the others. Now that doesn't mean that a character who ranks higher doesn't lose to a character that ranks lower. Ikaku is a perfect example of that, where Ikaku only beat one character who ranks higher than them because he was actually had the abilities to beat that one character. Same thing here with like Soifon. Soifon ranked where she did because I just didn't feel she beat the other characters that ranked higher than, more or less that ranked higher than her in certain ways, for certain reasons. Again, though, looking back on it, I might change that up if I ever redo the series. And I won't redo this series again unless we get some more information on some captain class characters, i.e. maybe learn what Ishin Love or Ukitaki's Bankai is, for example. But also, beyond that, judging their abilities, they made mention of the fact that that's just the way that's just the way Kubo wrote them. Kubo favored other characters than others. Well, yes, but I still have to go by what I've seen in the manga and in the anime. Just because that's the way they're written doesn't mean I get to change things about how they're written. And this is the big part I kind of stress, is like, we got to be careful about using headcanon. Because, yes, in theory, you could headcanon any character to be stronger than any of the other characters. Your headcanon can go as far as you want. And that's the problem with headcanon. Headcanon is fine to a smaller, because you have to pretty much judge their abilities facing off against these guys who they've never really fought before. The captains almost never really fought each other past the Soul Society arc and the Regai arc, which is not canon. Since they never actually fought, you do have to use some headcanon, but we have to be careful not to play favorites. The person if you want to see that argument, just go look at the Soifon video. You can find the discussion I was having. The Soifon, the person who was arguing for Soifon clearly was a big fan of Soifon. And as I put it to them, I like Soifon's abilities. Soifon's abilities are really cool. I'm just not a big fan of her character. That did it. But the argument was like, oh, well, these characters are overrated, so she should be stronger than them. That's not an argument. Just because they got more screen time doesn't mean, or just because they got more screen time or they're overrated, doesn't change the fact that I thought that she still was weaker than them. And we'll get to that further down the line, too, where obviously a lot of the characters got more screen time, the top 10 strongest ones. But that doesn't really play into it. That just means they did get to show off more of their abilities. I had to go with what was shown. I'm sorry. And again, I tried to be as fair with headcanon as possible, tried to extend that as far as possible. But I can only go so far with headcanon before I'm basically saying, well, now I'm just doing, fanfic and nodding my head. Like, well, he beat her because of this, and she beat him because of that. That's not how it works. I'm sorry if you disagree. It is just strictly my opinion, though. Let's keep it at that. And as I encourage the person too, if you don't agree with my opinion, that's cool. My suggestion then, become a content creator, make your own list. Not everyone's going to agree with my opinion, and that's fine. But just try to catch yourself from playing favorites as well, because that's then you're not being an impartial voter. Like, again, spoilers, Kenpachi's not number one. He's not the strongest Shinigami. I'm just going to say that right now. But he's still one of my favorite characters. Same with Warhara. So, yeah, it's like, you got to be careful when playing favorites. or not playing favorites. You gotta be careful when dealing with characters you're really a big fan of, because it does run you the risk of being impartial. So, or being partial to that character, playing favoritism, I guess is the term. You do have to, watch that. You have to watch that a little bit. All right, I've gone on 5 minutes without actually going in this video. Shinji Hirako, the current 5th Division captain, the former 5th Division captain for Eisenkirchen, basically kicked him out. And that's, let's be honest, that's kind of what happened. He kicked him out. And obviously experimented on him. He is, obviously, what I think, the 11th strongest captain rank Shinigami in the series. Now, why do I think that? Well, Shinji is an interesting character. We know he is skilled in Kido. We just don't see it very much, so I can't really factor it much into the fight. His hollow abilities are actually, he's probably, along with Kensei, the most well-rounded in using his hollow mask and abilities with his Soul Reaper powers. As you see with his fight with Grimmjow, he's able to do his Sero and everything. We don't really see him in hand-to-hand combat, so that's probably not something that's really into his forte. His personality is very unique. He's not a power-type character like a Aizen or a Yamamoto or a Kenpachi. He's a smart guy, but he's not an intellectual character like a Mayuri or a Uehara, per se. But what he more likens to is still an Uehara or the Kiraku, or Shinji Hirako, where he's a very deceptive character in this fighting strategy. He's very calm throughout his fight. He doesn't lose his cool almost ever. And even when we see that look of death on his face, oh, I'm gonna kill you with Aizen, he's still pretty much in control. He's still calm. So he's definitely someone who is able of keeping his cool under pressure, and able of being calm and collect under pressure, and being tricky, which really falls into his Bankai with Sakanade. Now, obviously, Sakanade, there it is right there. Sakanade's ability is to reverse your perception of everything around. So basically, your sense of direction, everything is kind of is just inversed. It's inversed and reversed, if you will. Shinji, but I just want to get the name up of his Bankai real quick. Not that we're going to go into we're going to be using his Bankai for obvious reasons when we talk about it, but still should at least know the name. So yeah, and that means that up is down. So when you're viewing him, he's upside down, even though he's actually right side up. But if he's coming at you from front, he's coming at you from behind. And if you go swing with the left, he's actually swinging at him with your left arm. You're actually swinging at him, or try to block him with your right arm. He's actually coming at you from the left. And Shinji even pointed out, this isn't something that's you can just figure. It's not like with Kabuto and Naruto got all of his nerves mixed up for a while from Tsunade. He was able to kind of figure it out. No, this is not something you can just easily figure out. This is no. You try to swing at me from the left, you're actually swinging at me from the right, and all that. And trained warriors are trained when your senses are heightened and honed to the point where you're trained like that, like a real warrior. You can't just immediately switch your instincts and training like that. So yeah, it's one of those things where it's completely disorientating to the point where he improved to the point where even his words came out backwards when he fought Bambietta. And then his Bankai, his Bankai, being known as, words here, Sakasama Yokoshima Hapu Fusagari, is a wide area Bankai that targets the opponents and allies alike without discrimination. The problem here is that with his Bankai, it basically inverts your alignment is what it does. To go with D&D terms, friends become enemies, enemies become friends, which means this Bankai is a completely useless Zanpakuto on a 1-on-1 fight. That's the problem here. It's completely useless in a 1-on-1 scenario. And the reason for that is that, yeah, your enemy might become your friend, but he might know he still has to fight you. So that's about it. And the thing is, even if he doesn't, you attack him, he's going to fight you. So it's useless in a 1-on-1 fight. It's only good against large crowds. And that's the weird thing about that. Think about that for a second. If Shinji wanted to, in the Gotei 13, basically hightailed it out of Soul Society or just out of range of his Bankai, and he faced down the entire Wandenreich, like all the Stern Ritters, minus maybe Uok, because I think Uok would probably be the exception to this, he would activate his Bankai and they would all kill each other, save for Gerard and maybe Lily Barrow, because of the way they are. And he would wipe out nearly all of them with his own Bankai. That's how powerful his Bankai is, but that's how restrictive his Bankai is. He can't have any allies near him. Excuse me. Ooh. So, yeah, take that for what it's worth. And I moved the Bankai down there when I meant to move the Shikai. So, yeah, and that's what it looks like. It looks like a flower opening up. He stands within the protected dome and keeps him safe. So, yeah, it's a pretty powerful Zanpakuto, but it's still also really tricky and really limiting in some ways. So, ultimately, let's get down to it. How did he fare against everyone? Well, he still doesn't really fare well against Yamamoto or Ichibei. Against Yamamoto, first off, yeah, his Shikai would work against both these guys. It would. Obviously, it's not like a Shikai doesn't work against, like anyone's immune to his Shikai. It's just a matter of people, and that's the real kicker of how I had to try to decide his fights and who would win against him. Is that does his opponent have some way around his Shikai? Do they have the skill, experience, or ability to actually get around his Shikai's ability? Yamamoto, 100%. His Ryatsu alone is massive, so he can easily outlast Shinji. And the fact that he can just spam fire from all directions means that he can just fight from an omnidirectional standpoint and just incinerate Shinji that way. So Shinji loses the Yama right off the bat. Against Ichibei with his Ichimonji, that was a bit of a trickier one to decide. Because, yeah, Ichibei wouldn't initially be able to counteract Shinji's Sakanade. However, he is old enough, experienced enough, and has his the wartime potential for his wisdom, wise enough to probably figure out how to get around, similar to an Aizen. Because if you're an Aizen level intelligent kind of individual or comparable to that, Aizen figured out how to get around Sakanade. He did. He figured it out and he adapted and he was good. So it's really more. If you can figure it or figure out how to counter it, then yeah, Shinji is kind of SOL at that point. And I do believe Ichimonji has the wisdom, the knowledge, and the technique to get around that. Add on to Ichimonji's ability. Ichibei and Ichimonji. I hate the fact that his Zanpakuto sounds almost like his name. Seeing as these guy who name things, you think that's a coincidence? Yeah. Plus, Ichimonji is dangerous even without releasing its ink, because it can basically cut the name of something in half and permanently depower it. That's not a weak ability. If he manages to even block Shinji's Zanpakuto even a little bit, if the Zanpakuto loses half its name, it's no longer Sakanade. It'd be, let's see, you know what? Let me get Sakanade's name up here real quick. Shinji, Shinji Shikai Sakanade. What would have Sakanade's name be? Sakanade would now be just Nade or Saka. So it would lose half its ability. So the inverted world would lose half of its power. So he, and plus again, yeah, Ichibei's got a whole bunch of like secret gear, like that giant Kido hand and all. Ichibei is a skilled and monstrous opponent. Now, to go off the argument that the person who was talking about why I gave him a win over Soifone last video, like you said, she's a trained fighter, and she's not anywhere near as intelligent as someone like an Uehara or an Ichibei or an Aizen. So I don't think she'd be able to regularly adapt to Sakanade's abilities. She might be able to get around it. And I'm not saying she couldn't. It would take longer than it did for Aizen or again, in Ichibei or something like that, because she just isn't because she's just too thoroughly trained. Her reflexes are too thoroughly honed for that. Add on to the fact that you also got to take in an X factor of personality. People like Shinji, who are very calm, jovial, playful, similar to an Urahara, who pisses her off to no end, piss her off. So she already becomes unhinged in that fight. She's fighting out of aggression, not using her head. And Shinji, I think, would very much capitalize on that. And her Bankai, as powerful as it is, and probably either would kill him or at minimum thoroughly injure him to the point where he couldn't fight anymore. While that is the case, he does have access to Sero and Kido. We know that. So he could probably blow it out of the sky if he needed to. And even if that's not the case, as long as she's in the inverted world, she's probably not going to get a solid beat on him. So yeah, it's one of those things that she is a skilled fighter. I don't harp on her for her abilities. I harp on her for her personality. I don't like her character as a person. Because her character just comes off as a spoiled brat, in my opinion. Not a spoiled brat, but she comes off as bratty. And I think that might be the point. And if that was the point, good on you for getting that across. But that just makes me not like her. But yeah, Soifone does not match up to Shinji or Shinji. Then you got the other captain, the third seat captains, and with Gin, or third squad captains, squad 3 captains. That was the word I was looking for. With Gin and Rose. And I'll be honest, I think Shinji beats both these guys, and I'm low on battery, so there's that. But I should be able to get this done before the video's done. Anyway, with Gin, it's a matter of his attacks are all very linear. Despite the fact, even in his Bankai, which is super fast and super long and has the poison aspect, his attacks are still extremely linear. There is not a lot of variety with his style. And because of that, if he's stuck with the inverted world, maybe he figures it out, but he's also got to compensate for the fact that his Zanpakuto's ability is to extend this giant, long, spear-like blade. And that's something that it's just not really a good type of weapon to be going up against in this type of fight with someone who's distorting your senses of direction. With Rose, it is a bit trickier because Rose, I don't think, needs necessarily to know exactly where you are. I just need you to hear the music. But with that being said, yeah, it's clear that Rose doesn't balance his hollow powers out with it. And like, if Kensei and Rose were using their hollow mask and mask they masked in, they probably would have won that fight because the power increase would have been enough to really overpower him. Why they didn't use their mask, I don't know. I think that really that was Kubo writing, basically trying to show off how Renji had grown. Speaking of Renji real quick, like Renji, Shinji, and Ikaku are not going to be showing up anymore on this, unless I'll address them, but I'm not going to be using them as imagery just because that's going to take up more time, and we already know they're going to lose. Renji, for instance, is very much a close-range melee fighter, with an extending blade and one Kido ability with Zakatempo. Unfortunately, that doesn't really give him much against Shinji. That doesn't counter Sakane's ability, unfortunately. And Shinji would be able to capitalize on that, I do believe. So, yeah, Rose, while Shinji would fall victim to, I think, Kinshara Butadon's abilities if he's not careful, the fact of the matter is, though, I think Rose still needs to know at least a little bit of where his opponent is. They would be under the effect of his Bankai per se, but he still has to direct where I think the dancing troupe goes. So ultimately, Shinji does win against them as well. But now on to some people that he flat out loses against. Unohana. Unohana is similar to, and it's going to be basically one of the big reasons Kenpachi wins against him too. While it is difficult to overcome the effects of Sakane, it's not impossible. And as we learned from Yajiru, whose instincts were enough to catch the false Sternritter V, the vanishing, who could even vanish his existence from your mind. Her instincts were so good that she was able to catch him up. I think that is the case with both Unohana and just to get Kenpachi out of the way. And Kenpachi, first off, his Ryatsu is so large that I don't think any attack that Shinji does is really going to do much. And he's so durable, that's the same way. But his reflexes are enough that he would easily be able to catch Renji. Same with Unohana. And they both have the instinct. That's the real thing here. Their instincts are to the point where because they are true, tried and true battlefield, just bloody warriors of death and destruction. Their instincts are to the point where I think it does bypass Sakane to the point where even if their sense of directions tell you one thing, their instincts is telling them something else, so they will be able to react and catch Shinji off guard. Add on to Unohana's Bankai, basically apparently being acid of some kind. The minute she catches him off guard, and the minute she hits him with any sort of acid, he's fucked. So yeah, Unohana would definitely beat Shinji. Byakuya is the same way, but this is more to a similar reason that Yama beats him. First off, he's more well-rounded than Shinji is. He's a master of Bakugo. He's a master of Kido, Bakugo, and Hado. He's a swords master, a Shunpo master, and apparently he is good at hand-to-hand combat from what I'm told, but I haven't seen that really. But what really gets him here is actually his Zanpakuto. Zenbon Zakura and Zenbon Zakura Kageyoshi, to a bigger extent, can be an omnidirectional wide-range attack. So Shinji is more than capable of attacking Shinji even under the effects of Sakanade. So even though Shinji would be able to put him under and maybe take him for surprise for a little bit, Byakuya would just be like, yeah, Bankai, symbol of Zakura Kageyoshi, and then just overwhelmed with a tsunami of blades. So he probably wouldn't do too bad, but he would lose. Against Sajin, yeah, he also wins that because Sajin, we don't talk about a straightforward linear type of attacking guy. That's Sajin in a nutshell. Shinji would just be avoiding Komura at every turn. Komura I do not believe he has the ability to overcome Sakanai's Shikai ability. And his Bankai, as powerful as it's just pure power. And Shinji would just easily be able to just, I'm over there. Whoops, stab, done. So yeah, Shinji would take Komamura out pretty quick. Against Shunsui, though, Shunsui is a very tricky guy to kind of figure out here. Because Shunsui is one of the oldest captains. He's definitely got the experience to understand what's going on and how to counter it. He's also a dual wielder, which actually gives him an extra advantage over Shinji. If he knows what's going on, if Shinji probably would brag about his inverted world, let's be honest. If Shinji brags too much and basically tells him what's going on, Shunsui is basically just going to realize when he sees him coming at one direction, swing both swords simultaneously and block one of the strikes. That's what he's going to do. When he figures that out, all he has to do is use a game and he's good. And then that's not even going into his Bankai, which would completely overwhelm anything that Shinji's throwing at him in this fight. So yeah, Shunsui definitely takes a win over over Shinji, I believe. Then you get to the Squad 9 captains and Lieutenant Shinji. Shinji loses. I should note right now, not Shinji, sorry, Shuhei. Shuhei, I should note right now, I don't think beats Shinji. The reason I don't think he beats Shinji is very simply that his Shikai is, again, it's tricky, but he still has to know where his opponent is. And he's someone who can get flustered very easy in a fight. So take that into consideration. Even if you try going as Bankai, it's not going to matter that much. He can probably only keep his Bankai activated for so long, quite frankly. And the fact of the matter is that even though they're connected, he's still got to figure out how to really attack Shinji. And I don't know if he can figure that out. Shinji can just keep slicing him, causing him pain, eventually maybe deactivating the Bankai. So there you go. Against Kensei and Tosen, I actually think he wins against them both as well. The reason for that is, yes, against Kensei, it's pretty obvious. Kensei is a very basic fighter as well. Very close range when he's on his Bankai. Even his Shikai, he still needs a line of sight. So if you can't figure that out, it's no good. So, and Shinji would capitalize on that as well. But with Tosen, it is a little different. Because Tosen obviously is blind, but he's capable of knowing the world around him. But that still means his sense of direction is completely changed. And it's clear that other things were inverted too. Shinji's words, maybe even like hearing somewhat inverted as well, quite possible. So if we go Bankai to Shikai, yes, Tosen probably has a better immunity against Sakanai because he can't see, but that doesn't change his sense of direction. That doesn't stop the sense of direction going on there. So, while it would be a tricky fight, and I think there's a way Tosen does beat Shinji, I think Shinji takes more wins than often than not. Then we get into Hitsugaya. Hitsugaya has the same reason for winning as, again, someone like Yama and Byakuya does. He can just kind of do omnidirectional attacks thanks to ice. He can just flood the field with ice if he needs to. He also has just far more variety with his attacks and would probably be able to figure out. Although he is someone who can also get easily flustered in the right circumstance. So that is something Shinji could capitalize on, but he'd still have to capitalize on that dealing with a Bankai that is the strongest ice-type Zanpakuto. So take that for what it's worth. As I mentioned, Kenpachi would be someone who I think who could beat Shinji. I don't think that's really in contention. He'd probably get... It would be similar to when Tozen put him into his Bankai. He'd probably be like wondering what the hell's going on at first, but he'd quickly pick up on it, I think. So, and then again, his instincts are to the point where even though his body's saying one direction, his instincts say another, and he just counterattacks Shinji and just cuts him down. Then you get into like the last three guys here. Mayuri is smart enough to the point of like an Urahara or an Aizen where I think he's not quite on their level, but he's like the next step down, where I think he'd just be able to figure it out. He'd just be able to figure out, and then with his Zanpakuto, he'd either be able to just cut Shinji quick enough to then paralyze him, or just release his Bankai and flood the field with poison. Add on the fact that he does have a Kusasaragi, I think it's called, basically the sickle. The sickle chain in his ear he can use, the robotic arm he can use, be able to regrow his arm potion. He does carry a lot of stuff in the battle, so like regular stuff. So it is something that is at Mayuri's disposal, and I think he would ultimately take the win over Shinji, unfortunately for Shinji. Last ones up are Urahara. Same reasoning for Aizen beating him. He would just be able to figure Sakanari out pretty quickly. I think that's the case. We are running low, but we're almost done. I think that's the case. I think he'd just be able to figure it out. And Rukia is one of those scenarios where, and yeah, he obviously beats Ikaku. Even though Ikaku's instincts might be similar to Kenpachi's in that regard, I still think he beats Ikaku pretty fairly. Rukia is one of those individuals where, yes, she would fall under the effects of Sakanari, but because of the effect of her Zanpakuto, her body getting colder, making contact with her might not be the best idea, because his sword starts to freeze, and if she flash freezes the area, he doesn't get out in time, he's done. I think that's the problem here, is that especially her Bankai is a flash freeze that is like omnidirectional. I think that would take him out. So I do think he would lose to Rukia ultimately. But Shinji was a really tricky guy to kind of put against other individuals. So let me know what you think about Shinji. I know I'm going to get people who disagree with me. I got someone who disagreed with me. That's so fun. That's just the way these break down. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed. Like, comment, share, subscribe. As always, you want us to review something, put in the comments below. Let us know. We'll get to a review of it at some point. Hit that bell if you want notifications. See you next time, folks.